Captain Vrak stretched his forearms as he looked out from the command deck of his bioship. The vessel pulsed around him like a living heart, its black walls breathing slowly. This wasn't just a ship, it was a creature bred for one purpose. Hunting Vrak had been doing this job for over 200 years. His team was the best in the Nexari hunting syndicate, maybe the best in 3 galaxies. Cass could move so fast that time seemed to slow down around her. Thul's senses were so sharp, he could smell fear from 3 miles away. And Nex could think faster than most computers. They were perfect killing machines, designed by centuries of genetic engineering. Their bones were stronger than steel. Their blood could heal wounds in minutes. Their eyes could see in complete darkness. They had never lost a hunt, not once. "Show me the target again," Vrak said to the ship's brain. Blue and green planet appeared in front of him, spinning slowly. Earth, the locals called it. Pretty enough, he supposed, but nothing special. Just another rock floating in space. "Tell me about these humans," he said. The ship's voice was calm and flat. "Primitive bipeds. They discovered fire only recently. Basic tool use. No space travel beyond their own moon. Average lifespan barely 80 years. No genetic modifications. No advanced weapons." Kess laughed, a sound like breaking glass. 80 years, that's barely enough time to learn how to walk properly. "They still use chemical explosives," Thul added, shaking his massive head. "How cute?" Nex was studying the data streams flowing across the walls. "It says here they fight each other constantly, over resources, territory, ideas. They can't even work together on their own planet." Vrak smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. The Syndicate had sent them after some real challenges before. The Viridians could sing reality into new shapes, but they'd broken them in 3 days. The Zephyrians could read minds and predict the future, but that hadn't saved them either. Each hunt had taught them something new about killing. But this wasn't even going to be fun. "How many hunting packs are they sending?" Kess asked. "Just us," Vrak replied. The whole team burst into laughter. 1 pack against an entire world? It was almost insulting. They'd handled entire star systems with twice their numbers. "The client wants it done quietly," Vrak continued. "No survivors, no evidence. Make it look like a natural disaster." "What kind of natural disaster kills every human on the planet?" Thul wondered. "Our kind," Nex said, and they all laughed again. Vrak looked at the peaceful blue world one more time. Soon it would be just another dead rock, and they'd move on to the next job. These humans would never know what hit them. The bioship began to accelerate toward Earth, carrying death in its living belly. The bioship's belly opened like a flower, releasing smaller vessels into the dark void around Earth. Each one was invisible to human technology, cloaked in living tissue that bent light around it like water. Vrak watched the quantum scramblers deploy across Earth's orbit. These weren't just machines. They were grown, bred from the neural tissue of a species that had tried to call for help during their final moments. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Scramblers in position," Nex reported, her fingers dancing across the organic control surface. "All electromagnetic communications are now impossible. No signals in, no signals out." Vrak nodded. This was always the first step. Cut them off from each other, make them blind and deaf. It had worked perfectly for 3,000 years. "Remember?" "The Viridians?" Kess said, stretching her razor-sharp claws. "They thought their crystal cities could sing for help across the galaxy. A lot of good it did them," Thul grunted. Their songs just echoed off dead stone by the end. The Viridians had been beautiful, Vrak remembered. Their crystal spires had rung like bells when they sang, creating music that could reshape matter itself. But beauty meant nothing when you couldn't call your allies. When your songs became whispers in an empty void. The Zephyrians had been even more challenging. A species of pure thought, they could predict attacks before they happened and coordinate, without speaking. But quantum scramblers worked on minds too, breaking the invisible threads that connected them. Within hours, their perfect unity had shattered into confused panic. "Each species teaches us something new," Vrak said, studying Earth's rotation below them. "The Viridians showed us how to disrupt crystal resonance. The Zephyrians taught us to scramble telepathic networks." "What will these humans teach us?" Nex asked. "Probably nothing we don't already know," Vrak replied. "They're too primitive. He pulled up Earth's population centers on the ship's living display. Millions of lights twinkled across the dark side of the planet, cities full of humans who had no idea death was coming. Seoul, Tokyo, New York, London, Mumbai, São Paulo, he said, marking each target. We hit them all at once. Make it look like natural disasters, earthquakes, storms, volcanic eruptions. The survivors will be too scattered and confused to organize. How long do we give them? Kess asked. No time at all. The moment we start, we finish. Clean and fast. Vrak had refined this technique across hundreds of worlds. The key was speed and coordination. Hit them everywhere at once, before they could adapt or respond. Most species broke within the first few hours when they realized they were truly alone. Begin descent, he ordered. The bioship started its silent approach toward Earth's atmosphere. Below them, humans went about their daily lives, working, sleeping, loving, dreaming, completely unaware that their entire species had just been marked for extinction. This would be over before sunrise. The attack began at exactly 3:17 a.m. Earth time. 4 bioships descended like black comets over the sleeping cities, their living hulls rippling with excitement. Vrak expected screaming, running, chaos. He expected humans to scatter like frightened animals. Instead, something impossible happened. In Seoul, air raid sirens began wailing before the bioship even touched down. Streetlights switched to emergency red. Military vehicles appeared from underground bunkers that shouldn't have existed. In New York, civilian radio operators were already coordinating evacuation routes, while police set up barricades. How are they responding so fast? Kess snarled over the comm. She was leading the London strike, watching in disbelief as humans organized into defensive positions within minutes. Vrak studied his tactical display, confusion growing in his chest. Their communications are blocked. This should be impossible. But somehow the humans were talking to each other. Not through radio or satellites. Those were jammed. They were using runners, hand signals, even church bells and car horns. Ancient methods that the quantum scramblers couldn't touch. In Tokyo, a group of firefighters had turned their water cannons into weapons, spraying the bioship's sensors with high-pressure streams. The ship's living skin recoiled, temporarily. Blinded, human soldiers used those precious seconds to position rocket launchers. They're actually fighting back, Thule reported from Mumbai, genuine surprise in his voice. Our taxi driver just rammed his car into my landing zone, on purpose. Vrak felt his first stab of irritation. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Humans were supposed to be primitive, disorganized. Instead, they were adapting faster than any species he'd encountered. The real shock came when Kess cornered a squad of soldiers in a subway tunnel in London. They were trapped, wounded, with no way out. Any sane species would surrender. Instead, the humans did something that defied all logic. "My name is Jin Park," one of the soldiers said in broken Nexari, blood running down his face. "I want you to remember that name." Kess laughed. "Why would I remember a dead primitive?" Jin smiled and held up a device. "Because I'm taking 3 of your kind with me." The explosion shook the entire tunnel. When the smoke cleared, Jin was gone, along with 3 of Kess's warriors. The human had chosen death over capture, taking enemies with him. Irrationally defiant, Vrak muttered, staring at the casualty reports. 3 warriors lost to 1 dying human. It made no tactical sense. But across all 4 cities, the same pattern was emerging. Humans weren't just fighting. They were sacrificing themselves to buy time for others. Teachers died protecting children. Police officers held positions until civilians escaped. Ordinary people became heroes in their final moments. For the first time in 3,000 years, Vrak began to doubt. These weren't primitive animals. These were something else entirely, something dangerous. 3 weeks into what should have been a simple extermination, Vrak stared at reports that made no sense. Red markers covered his tactical display like a rash, each one representing a failed hunter operation. "They're learning," Nex said quietly, her usual confidence shaken. "Every piece of our technology they capture, they understand it. Not just copying it, actually understanding how it works." In the ruins of Seoul, a human engineer named Hana had taken apart a hunter plasma rifle. Within hours, she'd figured, out how to power it using a car battery and some copper wire. The improvised weapon had taken down 2 more hunters before they could react. "That's impossible," Vrak growled. "Our technology is grown, not built. It should be beyond their comprehension." But the evidence kept mounting. In London, humans were using hunter biosensors to track other hunters. In New York, they'd somehow convinced a captured communication device to work for them instead. A Brazilian mechanic named Carlos had even managed to reprogram a hunter drone, turning it against its former masters. "Sir," Kess's voice crackled through the comm, tight with worry. "Thul's patrol hasn't reported in for 6 hours. Vrak felt his blood go cold. Thul was leading a sweep through the Amazon rainforest, hunting human survivors who'd fled into the jungle. It should have been easy. Thul could track a whisper through a hurricane. "Send a recovery team," Vrak ordered. The recovery team found them 2 hours later. What they discovered sent shockwaves through the entire hunter fleet. Thul's patrol had been ambushed in a clearing deep in the Amazon. But this wasn't random violence. It was a message. The 3 hunter bodies were arranged in a perfect triangle, their weapons stripped and their biosuits carefully removed. Human military patches from a dozen different countries decorated the scene like flags. At the center, scratched into the bark of a massive tree in roughneck Sari script, were 3 words: "Now we hunt." "How did they learn our language?" Kess whispered when she saw the message. Vrak had no answer. Humans shouldn't even know Nexari existed, let alone be able to write it. But somehow, they'd figured it out, just like they'd figured out hunter technology. Just like they'd figured out how to fight back. The worst part was the tactical brilliance of the ambush. The humans had used the jungle itself as a weapon, turning familiar terrain into a death trap. They'd studied hunter movement patterns and predicted exactly where Thul would go. "They're not acting like prey anymore," Nex observed, studying the tactical data. "They're acting like us." For 3,000 years, the hunters had been the predators of the galaxy. Every species they encountered became prey, running and hiding until the inevitable end. But these humans were different. They didn't just fight back. They learned. They adapted. They evolved from prey into something far more dangerous. They had become hunters themselves, and now Vrak was beginning to understand what it felt like to be hunted. Vrak sat in his command chamber, watching his perfect hunting strategies crumble one by one. Every tactic that had worked for millennia was being countered by humans within days, sometimes hours. "Stealth approach failed in Berlin," Kess reported, her voice strained. "They detected us using some kind of seismic sensors they built from earthquake equipment." "The night vision advantage is gone too," Thul added. "Humans in Mumbai are using thermal imaging and motion detectors. They're actually hunting us in the dark now." But the worst part wasn't the countermeasures. It was how humans were sharing information across their entire planet, without any technology the hunters could detect or jam. In Seoul, an engineer named Hana had done something that shouldn't have been possible. She'd turned the city's subway system into a weapon. Using nothing but explosives, water pumps, and electric cables, she'd created a network of traps that stretched for miles underground. "Show me the Seoul footage again," Vrak commanded. The display, lit up with security camera recordings, hunter strike teams entering subway stations, confident they were pursuing fleeing humans. But Hana had thought 3 steps ahead. As soon as the hunters descended into the tunnels, water began flooding from the pumps above. Not enough to drown them, but enough to conduct electricity from the modified rail lines. The hunters' biosuits, designed to be living armor, became conductors. Dozens of elite warriors were incapacitated in minutes by a trap built from century-old human technology. How did she coordinate this across 30 stations, Nex wondered. "We're monitoring all communications, but humans had found ways to talk that the hunters never considered. Children playing games passed messages through patterns. Street musicians played coded melodies. Even graffiti contained tactical information that humans could read, but alien. Computers couldn't understand. The psychological warfare was even more devastating. Humans had started broadcasting videos of captured hunter technology being rebuilt and improved. A mechanic in Detroit had turned a hunter plasma cannon into a defensive turret. Scientists in Tokyo were using bio-ship tissue to grow new medicines. There, showing the galaxy that we can be defeated, Vrak realized with growing horror. The broadcasts weren't just propaganda, they were instruction manuals. Every human success was being shared with others, creating a learning network that spanned the entire planet. When a farmer in Kenya figured out how to disrupt hunter sensors using common fertilizer, that knowledge reached resistance cells in every major city within hours. "Sir," Nex said quietly, "they're adapting faster than we are." It was the truth. Vrak didn't want to face. The hunters' greatest weapon had always been their ability to adapt to any situation. They studied their prey, learned their weaknesses, and adjusted their tactics accordingly. But humans were doing the same thing, only faster, much faster. For the first time in his long life, Vrak wondered if they'd chosen the wrong prey. These humans weren't just surviving, they were evolving into something that might actually win. Moscow in winter was supposed to be the perfect target. The cold would slow human reflexes, the snow would hide hunter movements, and the massive city would provide plenty of chaos to cover their operations. Vrak had deployed his largest strike force yet, 50 elite hunters moving through the frozen streets like ghosts. The trap was so perfect that Vrak didn't see it until it was too late. It started when the hunters reached Red Square. The ancient cobblestones beneath their feet had been carefully weakened with controlled explosions. As the first squad crossed the square, the ground gave way, dropping them into the metro tunnels below, but these weren't empty tunnels. Moscow's subway system had been turned into something far deadlier than Hana's work in Seoul. Russian engineers had spent weeks preparing every station, every corridor, every emergency exit. "Contact lost with Alpha Squad," Nex reported, her voice tight with worry. Vrak watched the tactical display as red dots representing his hunters began disappearing one by one. In the tunnels below, humans had created a maze of death. Water pipes had been rerouted to flood specific sections on command. Electrical systems had been rewired to create barriers of pure energy. Even the air itself had become a weapon. Ventilation systems pumped industrial chemicals that made hunter biosuits malfunction. "Beta Squad report," Vrak commanded. Static answered him. The real genius wasn't just the traps, it was the coordination. Every citizen in Moscow had become part of the defense. Babushkas sitting on park benches were spotters, using hand signals to guide defenders. Children playing in the snow carried messages between resistance cells. Even stray dogs had been trained to detect hunter pheromones. Vrak deployed his reserve forces, sending them through the safer upper levels of the city. But the humans had planned for this too. As hunter squads moved through Moscow's streets, buildings began collapsing with mathematical precision. These weren't random demolitions. Russian demolition experts had spent their entire careers learning how to bring down massive structures safely. Now they used that knowledge to create an urban avalanche, with each falling building triggering the collapse of the next. There, everywhere, Nex's voice cracked through the comm, panic finally breaking through her usual calm. "The buildings, the sewers, the people, everything is fighting us." Vrak felt something he'd never experienced before, helplessness. His perfectly planned assault was being torn apart by ordinary humans, using nothing but their city and their knowledge of it. In 6 hours, he'd lost an entire strike force. 50 of the galaxy's most dangerous predators, defeated by taxi drivers and school teachers who knew their home better than any alien ever could. For the first time in 3,000 years, Vrak understood what it meant to be hunted. And he discovered something terrifying about humans. They were very, very good at it. The first sign something was wrong came at 0400 hours when Vrak's bioship began twitching. Not the gentle pulse of normal life functions, but violent spasms. That sent crew members tumbling across the organic corridors. "What's happening?" Vrak demanded, rushing to the command center. Nex's claws danced frantically across the control surfaces, but nothing responded correctly. "The ship's nervous system is malfunctioning, life support is fluctuating, weapons are offline, and navigation is completely scrambled." Then the lights dimmed and a voice filled the command chamber. A human voice speaking perfect Nexari with a slight accent that Vrak couldn't place. "Hello, Captain Vrak. My name is Dr. Kim. I've been waiting to talk to you." Vrak spun around, looking for the source of the voice. Impossible. Our quantum encryption is unbreakable. A soft laugh echoed through the ship. Unbreakable to other aliens, maybe. But you made one crucial mistake. You assumed we were primitive. The main display suddenly filled with data streams, not hunter data, but human code flowing through their systems like blood through veins. Vrak watched in horror as weeks of carefully collected intelligence scrolled past. Hunter positions, weapon capabilities, ship weaknesses, tactical plans. We've been inside your network since the first day, Dr. Kim continued calmly. Every time you captured one of our devices, we let you. Every time you studied our technology, we were studying yours. We learned your language from your own computers. Kess snarled and tried to activate the ship's defenses manually, but her claws passed through holographic controls. Everything's fake, she whispered. Not fake, the human voice corrected. Redirected. Your weapons systems are working perfectly. They're just pointing at your own ships now. Through the viewports, Vrak could see hunter bioships across the fleet firing on each other, their targeting systems completely compromised. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers in the darkness of space. But the real terror came from below. Human fighters were rising from Earth's atmosphere, not primitive jets, but sleek vessels that moved like living things. They were hunter ships, rebuilt and enhanced with human engineering. "This is Wing Commander Wu to all units," came a transmission. "Remember Seoul. Remember Jin Park. Remember everyone they took from us." Vrak recognized the name. Jin was the soldier who died in the London tunnels, the one who'd chosen death over surrender. Now his sacrifice was being avenged by warriors flying ships that shouldn't exist. The human fighters moved with impossible coordination, striking at the hunter fleet's weak points with surgical precision. They knew exactly where to hit because they'd been watching, learning, planning for weeks. "You wanted to hunt us," Dr. Kim's voice said softly. "Now we hunt you." For the first time in his long life, Vrak felt true fear. The hunters had become the hunted. With his fleet in ruins and his pack scattered across the burning cities below, Vrak made a decision that surprised even himself. Standing in the wreckage of what used to be downtown Seoul, he broadcast a message on all human frequencies. "I am Captain Vrak of the Nexari Hunting Syndicate," his voice echoed across the ruins. "I challenge humanity to single combat. Send your greatest warrior to face me, and let this end the way our ancestors intended, with honor." It was an ancient tradition among his people, dating back thousands of years. When all else failed, when strategy and tactics meant nothing, two warriors would settle everything with claw and fang. The human response came within an hour. A figure approached through the rubble-strewn streets, moving with the careful gait of someone who'd seen too much war. She wasn't the super soldier Vrak expected. No genetic modifications, no powered armor, no impossible weapons. "Sergeant Mira Chen, Korean Marines," she said simply, removing her helmet to reveal a face crossed with scars. "I accept your challenge." Vrak studied her with predator's eyes. She was small by his standards, maybe half his height and a quarter his weight. Her equipment was basic human military gear, a rifle, some grenades, a combat knife. Against his bio-enhanced strength and speed, it should have been laughably unfair. The fight began at sunset, with the burning city as their arena. Vrak moved. Like liquid lightning, his claws slashing through concrete where Mira had been standing milliseconds before. He was faster, stronger, deadlier in every measurable way. But Mira had something he'd never encountered before. When his claws raked across her shoulder, she rolled with the strike and used her momentum to land a knife thrust at his knee joint. When he cornered her in a collapsed building, she brought the entire structure down on both of them, using the chaos to escape while he was stunned. "Stay down," Vrak snarled as she struggled to her feet for the dozenth time, blood streaming from her dozen wounds. "No," she replied simply and kept fighting. This was what confused him most. Any rational creature would surrender when facing impossible odds. But Mira seemed incapable of giving up. Every time he thought he'd won, she found a new way to attack, a new angle to exploit, a new strategy to try. She was learning his fighting style, adapting to his tactics, turning his own strength against him. When he relied on speed, she predicted. His movements. When he used brute force, she redirected it. Hours passed. The sun set and rose again. And still somehow this impossible human kept fighting. For the first time in his life, Vrak began to understand what humans truly were. Not the strongest species, but perhaps the most stubborn. The sun was setting on the second day when Vrak finally collapsed. Not from injury, though he had plenty of those, but from something he'd never experienced before, exhaustion, pure, bone-deep tiredness that came from fighting an opponent who simply refused to quit. Mira stood over him, swaying slightly, her face streaked with blood and dirt. She looked like she'd been through a war, which she had, but she was still standing. "I don't understand," Vrak gasped, staring up at this impossible human. "I am stronger, faster, better designed for combat." "In every way." Mira wiped blood from her mouth and managed a tired smile. "Yeah, but I'm more stubborn." She knelt beside him and Vrak tensed, expecting the killing blow. Instead, she pulled medical supplies from her kit and began treating his wounds. "What are you doing?" he asked, genuinely confused. "My job," she replied, applying pressure to a deep cut on his arm. "I'm a soldier, not a murderer. The fight's over." Across the ruined cityscape, the surviving members of Vrak's pack watched in stunned silence. This wasn't how things were supposed to end. The victor was supposed to claim their prize, to feast on the defeated. But this human was helping him. Kess approached cautiously, her weapons lowered. "Why?" she asked Mira. "We came here to destroy your entire species." Mira looked up from bandaging Vrak's wounds. "Because that's what separates us from you. We know when to stop." Vrak felt something crack inside his chest, and it wasn't a broken rib. For 3,000 years he'd believed that strength made right, that the ability to kill made you superior. But lying here, being treated with kindness by someone he'd tried to murder, he realized how wrong he'd been. With shaking hands, he activated his communicator and broadcast on all syndicate frequencies. "This is Captain Vrak to High Command," he said, his voice heavy with something he'd never felt before. "Shame. Contract terminated. Mission failed. Species classification, apex predator. Recommendation, immediate non-interference treaty." There was a long pause before High Command responded. "Explain your failure, Captain." Vrak looked at Mira, who was now helping Kess treat her own wounds with the same gentle care. "We are not the apex predators here. They are. Not because they're stronger or faster, but because they're better than us. They know how to win without becoming monsters." Within hours, the surviving hunter ships departed Earth's orbit. They carried with them a new understanding that would reshape the galaxy. Some species were too dangerous to hunt, not because you couldn't catch them, but because trying to hunt them revealed just how far you'd fallen. 3 months later, Earth received its first invitation to join the Galactic Council, not as subjects but as the teachers who'd shown the universe's most feared predators the meaning of mercy.